Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Guys, where we break down geopolitics, global power plays and the forces reshaping our world without the noise. Just depth, perspective and the only truth. So, guys, today we are diving into a set of major geopolitical developments that, though scattered across the regions, are deeply interconnected. From a high stakes trade negotiation between India and the EU to Italy's quiet but strategic alignment with the United States to a brewing storm in Ukraine as top military figures clash with American strategies. And in the backdrop of it, US Iran talks quietly reigniting under the surface of war rhetoric. If you think this is just another week in global news, think again. These stories are shaping a new world order, and we are going to unpack every piece of it. So, guys, let's get started. So, first point to discuss is Ursula's zero for zero tariff push and India's response to it. Let's start with the Brussels. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen recently revived the zero for zero tariff policy, a strategic initiative that seeks to eliminate import duties between the EU and its strategic partners in key sectors. The pitch is simple zero tariffs on both sides, zero industrial distortions. But beneath that, simplicity is a carefully calculated move. Why? Because the European Union is increasingly anxious about its industrial future, with the United States subsidizing its manufacturing under the Inflation Reduction Act and China expanding its grip on global supply chains. Europe is stuck in the middle. The zero for zero approach is Europe's answer, which is lock in allies, build secure trade corridors, and reduce reliance on adversaries. Now, here is where India comes in picture. New Delhi has shown keen interest in this deal. In fact, Indian policymakers are actively pushing to be part of this tariff-free framework, especially in sectors like pharmaceuticals, green tech, and IT services. Why? Because this gives India the golden chance to expand its exports into a high value, high consumption market like Europe without battling the US protectionist hurdles. But it's not all roses. India wants favorable terms. It wants guarantees that European carbon border taxes won't become a backdrop tariff. And it wants agriculture protections intact. The EU, on the other hand, wants stricter labor and environmental standards, something that touches the nerve of India's domestic manufacturing policies. So, guys, will this deal happen? The will is there, but the deals will determine everything. And in a world rapidly decoupling from China, India knows this is a moment to log in a long term, high trust economic partnership with Europe. So, let's see what happens in the future. Second point is Meloni's strategic pivot to the United States. Now, let's move westward to Italy and specifically to Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Her government has been quietly but decisively shifting Italy closer to the United States in strategic alignment. The goal, the most telling sign is Rome's recent announcement to exit China's Belt and Road Initiative. Italy was the only G7 country to ever sign on to it, and Meloni has now reversed that. But this isn't just about BRI. Meloni's tilt towards Washington is a part of a broader recalibration. Italy is doubling down on NATO, aligning its military posture without US interest, and seeking deeper transatlantic cooperation on energy, AI, and semiconductors. And here is the subtext. Italy, like many European nations, is increasingly delusioned with the idea of European strategic autonomy. With France struggling to assert leadership and Germany back down in economic stagnation, Meloni sees the US as the more reliable anchor in a world of volatility. So, this is a major signal, not just from Italy but about Europe. Even as Brussels talks of sovereignty and independence, key players are quietly moving back under the US umbrella. Because when the world is fractured, alliances matter more than the ideals. Third point to explore is Zolny and the cracks in Ukraine war strategy. Now let's talk about a more uncomfortable truth in the war in Ukraine. General Valery Zaluzhny, the now dismissed commander-in-chief of Ukraine armed force, has been at the center of what can only be described as a growing demand between Kiev and Washington. Zelensky had become increasingly vocal about the unsustainable nature of Ukraine's war effort. He warned that the war had entered a stalemate, that new recruits were dwindling, that Western weapons, while appreciated, weren't changing the fundamentals on the battlefield. And most controversially, he hinted that the West expectations were disconnected from Ukraine's reality. These are the words of Commander in Chief. His dismissal was a political move, but also a strategic one. Washington didn't appreciate the candor, they wanted unity, optimism, a war narrative that justified continued funding. Zaloni's honesty was in a way inconvenient, but let's ask the harder question, was he wrong? Because on the ground, Ukraine is facing a manpower crisis. Russian defenses have solidified, and Western aid, once free flowing, is now back down in political deadlock, particularly in the US Congress. So, this movement reveals something deeper. Like Ukraine's war has become a proxy conflict shaped more by Western geopolitical calculations than the on ground realities. And as cracks emerge in Kiev's alignment with the Washington, we may be entering a phase where political optics take precedence over strategic clarity. So, guys, fourth point to explore is quiet US Iran talks amidst loud conflicts. And finally, we turn to a development most media outlets are barely whispering about. Yet, it's among the most important points. The United States is quietly engaging Iran in backchannel diplomacy. Yes, the same Iran that's been painted as the academy in the Middle East. The same Iran accused of funding proxies from Lebanon to Yemen. So, what's happening here? Multiple reports suggest that intermediaries, most likely from Oman and Qatar, are facilitating indirect conversations between Washington and Tehran. The goal is de escalation, avoiding a wider regional war, and most urgently, ensuring that Hezbollah or Iran doesn't fully enter the Gaza conflict or launch a broader front from Lebanon. But there is more context to this. There are rumors, unconfirmed but precedent, that the US is open to revisiting aspects of the nuclear deal, provided Iran reins in its regional militia networks and halts uranium enrichment beyond certain thresholds. So, why is this significant? Because even as the US arms Israel and condemns Iranian proxies publicly, it is privately working to contain the situation, not escalate it. It's a classic dual strategy diplomacy in the shadows, deterrence in the spotlight. And it tells us one thing clearly Washington does not want a regional war, especially not in an election year. So, guys, what does this all mean? It means we are living through a global transition where alliances are shifting, realism is replacing idealism, and economic strategies are being recalibrated for survival, not just for the growth. India is negotiating its rise through strategic partnerships. Europe is clinging to US stability even as it talks independence. Ukraine is learning that being the front line of a proxy war comes with deep cost. And the US, despite its rhetoric, is quietly negotiating with its enemies to avoid the bigger chaos. This is the world as it is, not as politicians tweet it. And it's our job to see it clearly. So, guys, if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. And I would love to hear from you. Let's talk about it. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.